Hello, and welcome back to the Titans of Food Service podcast. Nick Portillo here. I'm your host. Today, I'm welcoming the general manager of Bell Brands on the food service or away from home segment, David Garascia. And David has a very cool story in the food business. He got into the industry on the retail side, actually, as a retail broker, and eventually made it over to the food service side, working for companies like Frito-Lay. And now he's over at Bell Brands. He joined Bell Brands about 2021. And Bell Brands, as we all know, it's a massive brand in retail, and they have a fantastic brand recognition and brand awareness. And so he's really been in charge of the food service side of building that up. And so he's going to give some really actionable nuggets here in this episode of exactly how he's been able to do that, starting with getting broadline, getting into non-commercial GPOs, if you will, really focusing on belly-to-belly selling and educating your sales team, and now looking at into the future of what other innovative products can he sell to his customer base? How can we sell into all different day parts, which would be breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacking, all those types of things. Really cool conversation. If you're new to food service or you're in food service trying to grow your brand, whatever it may be, this is a great episode to kind of get a behind the scenes look of how a very large company is building their food service side of their business, and some really actionable steps and nuggets that I think will really resonate with you. Without further ado, I like the formality of that. Without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome David. All right, David, welcome to the Titans of Food Service podcast. I appreciate you you coming on and joining me.
Nick, glad to be here. Excited to talk about the industry and see what interesting stuff comes out of our chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. How did you get into the food business?
At the very beginning, when I was actually in high school, late high school, early college, I actually worked for a retail broker part time,
Oh,
and they had the Gatorade at the time of Stokely Game Camp. Got into that. Had like a little C-store route during the summer, trying to sell like full doors of Gatorade, and I think the stores, if they kept it all summer, they got like $100, which in today's world that would be meaningless, right? Um, and spent a couple summers doing Kroger resets with beech nut baby food and stacking all those little jars. And when I finished, my college education, so I had this on my resume. This is when you still went in, and I'm going to date myself. You still went in and you mailed your resume in to an ad you saw in the paper. Started with Coca-Cola Enterprises, which was the bottling arm in the United States, and they were just launching Powerade into the convenience store channel, and just I guess somebody saw it on my resume that I'd sold Gatorade, and was there just long enough to know that I really enjoy going out and moving people to actions with my words, like the high energy, calling on they called it a cold bottle route, so I was calling on restaurants and bars, selling Coke premix and post mix systems, but got recruited to Frito-Lay food service, and really that was really my entry into the food service industry. So where they had to define channels of trade like we have today: commercial, non-commercial, QSR, et cetera. And from there, it's just took off like a rocket.
yeah, man. How interesting to start as in the broker business. I always find, me, I started in the food business on the broker side as well. And growing up, my dad being a food broker, if my friends or anybody would ask, like, what's your dad do for a living? I'm like, I don't really know. He sells food or
Right.
something to restaurants. It was, as a kid, like I just couldn't comprehend what he was doing. So it was very interesting that you kind of similar path to me. That's kind of
Yeah,
your first, jump into the food
yeah,
business on the broker
absolutely.
side.
Yeah. And you learn a lot in those types of agencies. I think back, like, you did learn a lot. Just the interaction between, the principal, the line owner, and then the folks at, the customer facing team. They're the ones out grinding it out. They're the ones out getting it done. Of course, there's been a lot of changes both on the retail brokerage and agency relationships as well as in food service.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me, so you started in the retail side, right? Eventually you get into food service, especially on Frito-Lay.
Yeah.
Your career progresses. Now you're at Bell Brands. So tell me a little bit about your role and how you got to and how you got into Bell Brands.
Yeah. So, PepsiCo, food service, there are a lot of different careers that came after that, always in the food service class of trade. ultimately I was working in a private equity project. So I'd spent some time doing private equity on the food and beverage side. It was helping with the transaction, and some folks, connections. I would say anybody that's listening today or will listen in the future, your relationships matter in your life. So continue to just make sure you stay in touch with people that you trust and value, that you learn from. And that's essentially how I ended up at Bell. So I had a relationship with some senior executives in France that I'd interact with, and they said, "Hey, we really want to accelerate our food service and convenience business here in the United States." And this was early 21, just coming out of the pandemic. And so we had some discussions, and ultimately the first time when I interviewed with everybody in the US, they said, "You know what, we like you, but we're gonna pass." Like, that's all right, that's fair. And then they circled back and they said, we do think you're the right person, the right role for the job. So that's how I ended up here. I give Bell a lot of credit. In the middle of the pandemic, as you lived through it, Nick. A
Hmm.
lot of my peers lived through it. I lived through it. From the industry standpoint, it was just chaos in a lot of markets around the United States. And in the midst of all this, Bell made the decision. Hey, we saw over the horizon. We saw this was a temporary setback. We want to be where consumers are outside grocery and mass and club, right? And these various different statistics. If you've got $1 in your pocket, you're only going to spend half of it in the grocery or the mass class of trade. You're going to go to C-store. You're going to go to food service. You're going to go to the airport. All those things, and they knew they needed to be there, so they made the investment during pandemic. Um, People count, head count, product development, things of that nature. So started in real basically the middle of 21 with the ambitions to go out and let's get our products, let's get our brands where people are, where people eat, drink, go to school, have fun.
How interesting for a company to make an investment during that time period. If you can remember back, I remember on the broker side, people were being furloughed or laid off,
Yeah,
or temporarily out of work because it was hard. Sales and food service, they didn't go down to zero, but it was closer to 0% than 100%. I'll tell you that.
yeah,
It was the time period. So good on Bell for making that investment and seeing the
yeah.
opportunity.
They had the vision, and they had leaders that had been come out of the food service class of trade, so they recognized that well, let's build now. And in fact, it was a benefit. There were so many high quality people in the marketplace that were unfortunately displaced from their roles. Some organizations either didn't have the cash flow or the resources, which I understand, right? Nobody knew what was going to come tomorrow, and the company has to do what's how do we survive today? Well, there are so many good high quality folks out in the marketplace. We were able to bring some of those into our organization as we built the team out. And, ultimately having the right people on your team, at the end of the day, that matters more than probably anything else you're going to do. Is um, if you got a team of folks that are all in, then good things are going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember at the end of 2020, we had a position open for a chain person, and we had more resumes and interviews for that one position than any other position in the prior 5 or 6 years of our company's existence. And so I was actually just talking to the person that we elected
Sure.
last week, and I was like, that was the most intense, most robust interview process we've ever gone through. The candidates were insanely good, all of them,
Right.
and it's a real true testament to this individual, for making it through that process. But yeah, definitely could resonate with what you're saying. So now at Bell Brands, so I know that in Bell Brands, big in retail, right? And so you're in food service now. How does that look, and where have you taken the business since 2021 when you joined?
Yeah. So kudos to Bell making the investment in the out of home channel, away from home channel. And we look at that as traditional food service and convenience, right? For those that are listening. And it's really similar interaction in a lot of places. You're outside the house, you're looking for snacking, you're looking for a meal. Um, there's a lot of blending now between convenience and food service. But what I would say to anybody, including the folks at Bell, my boss and the senior team at Bell, the most challenging thing that I've ever done, and I've done it 3 times in my career, is building out and growing a food service business in a retail centric organization.
Mm.
Um, the the products are about the only thing that are similar. right? The format's not similar. The pack size typically is not similar. The levers to grow are uniquely different in grocery and your retail class of trade than are in food service. I would say the data connectivity and the data centricity that exists today in retail is probably 15 to 20 years ahead of where we are in the traditional food service class of trade for lots of different reasons. Um,
Mhm.
so a lot of my time is spent educating the organization that the the decision making tree that exists in a retail environment is different, doesn't exist at all in the food service. It's more, I would say, belly to belly selling. Back to what I said about relationships. You know, where a retail merchandiser, buyer, decision maker will really oftentimes look at data, whether it's consumption data, IRI data, the list is endless. I think when you're talking to a food service decision maker, whether it's a distributor, whether it's an operator that's an independent store with one location or a chain, it's really about the value that you're selling. Can you make my guest experience better so I can sell more product or sell the same amount of product at a higher price point? So um, that's really where we take our time, Nick, and to go out in the marketplace and show our value. Whether it's a distributor, whether it's a chain, whether it's working with our broker partners, our sales agency partners, to explain to them we sell value, you know. And I think that's the important piece that I would challenge anybody if you're going to go into the food service class of trade, whether you're an established brand like Bell. And look, it does make it easy when you walk in. We spend less time explaining who we are because we have some big brands, Baby Bell, Go Go Squeeze, Borsan, among others. So it's a little easier to like get in the door. Oh yeah, I know those brands. I maybe buy them as a consumer, as a shopper. But you still, at the end of the day, you still have to show the value that you're delivering for that operation. And I think a lot of food service manufacturers that are primarily focused in food service, they figured that out. They've got that model that it's a value play, right? That doesn't. And people hear value and they think it's cost driven, and I don't. I want to separate those two. Value to me is cost and price are usually on the lower quartile of things that we would talk about and lead with. It's always about how can we make your operation better, right? And that could be there's so many different things. We could spend all day talking about that. But people hear value, they think cost. And we hear value in the food service class of trade and we think, how do we make your operation better than it is today? So more consumers, more guests come in. That ultimately is how we win. I think a lot of organizations that are new to food service, and I know this has been a theme, a lot of this, the commentary that you have and your engagement with the industry. I think that's a theme that I enjoy talking about. Like you have to deliver value. You have to be willing to make the investment in the class of trade. You have to understand as an organization, you know, it's a different business model. um, it's not any more complex or difficult. It's just different.
We're approached by brands all the time. When I say all the time, maybe two or three a week that want representation. They started in retail. They say, "Hey, I'm at Whole Foods. I'm at Sprouts. I'm at
Mhm.
XYZ, retail operation, and I want to get into food service." And my response is always, you kind of have to get in and build the business a little bit before you call me as a broker. What are some of the challenges or some of the roadblocks you have to overcome working with your company who has really established themselves big time in retail and now, food service is kind of that next frontier for them?
Yeah, I think that probably from a practical application standpoint is a consumer standing at a merchandising case in a retail environment or a club environment like a Costco. um, they have a different and unique set of needs. It isn't just based on the taste of the product. The taste matters, right? At the end of the day, it's food. Whether you're a chef, whether you're a consumer buying something, I think the key for us has been to unlock, explain to the organization that you know let's go in the back of the kitchen. Let's watch how products are being used. Let's watch the workflow within a commercial kitchen or restaurant. Let's seek to understand. It's the applications are different. Packaging matters in a way that doesn't necessarily matter in a retail environment. I was talking about like waste reduction on packaging, something that simple that if you're a consumer and you buy waste from, if you buy some package of any product from a grocery store, Albertsons or Safeway or Kroger, wherever you live, The retailer doesn't worry about that waste per se because it's leaving their environment and it's going back to the consumer. The consumer owns the waste, whether they recycle it or put it to a landfill, or however they ultimately dispose of it. A restaurant operator says, "I own all this. I got this corrugate. I've got the packaging. I have these containers." So just something as simple as reducing packaging waste for a high velocity item. When the product design team or the innovation team, you have to think differently. You have to train the organization that there's a different need set. So um, I think it really starts with us is how the products are used, where they're being prepared. So if we sell, for example, Boursin cheese, so if you're not familiar with it, it's a very rich, flavorful product, a Gournay cheese. And we make it in the US and we import it from France. So we have a couple different options here, but the consumer buys it and they bring it home and hey, you know what? They might cook with it. They might have seen a recipe on TikTok or one of our websites, or you might just have it on a charcuterie board for some entertaining. The chef looks at it, or the cook or the line prep guy, they're looking at it completely differently. They're like, how do I open this box? Why is there so much packaging on here? Oh, I need to slack it out maybe, right? Because it's a firm product and I can't work with it if I don't slack it out. So I think educating, um, our team, our decision makers, cross functional supply chain, R&D folks that are developing new products, even our senior leadership team. Let's get them out into a kitchen. Whether it's with one of our salespeople, whether it's with a broker, a salesperson, so they can see how our products are used. They can get the feedback directly from the operator. And I think if you do that, that's the first step. Let's just continue to educate in the channel because you and I take it for granted. We've been in the food service industry. Um, we know where to go. It's instinctive to do those things. If you spent your career, if you're a general manager and you're running a business unit or a country or a company here in the United States, and you've spent your career leading Kroger and Albertsons and Walmart and retailers, it just isn't in your muscle memory that these are the challenges that you have to address in order to be successful in the food service. So the good news is many organizations are open to that. Many organizations, if you have smart people, they trust their sales team, they trust our team to educate, and then we slowly grow the business. But I think what you said, if you have clients coming to you, like if you haven't spent time in the back of a restaurant, then you don't understand the food service industry.
Totally agree. When you take someone in to the back of a restaurant, you don't go through the front door, you go to the back
Right.
and you're right there. Once you go in the back to the kitchens, you're right there. There's the chef. People are, going back and forth, preparing things, chopping things, handling all the tickets that they've got. Like it's a different ball game. And, having an appointment with a chef is uniquely different than someone sitting in an office somewhere, because this person's on their feet. It's hard maybe sometimes to track them down. You have to make your presentation within a few minutes. Here's the samples, get it in their mouth. It's pretty fascinating. And you're right, we do take it for granted because this is what we do every day.
Right.
I remember I saw an operator years ago, and she was like, there's a difference because she's a food service unit within a grocery store. She's like, when I deal with the retail brokers versus the food service brokers, she goes, I've been to the offices of these retail brokers, and they have very comfortable chairs. You can tell they're sitting there a lot.
Right.
But on the food service side, they're not that great at chairs. They kind of squeak a little bit. They're tilted to one side because you guys are out selling. That's just what you do. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that's a pretty good comparison between the two for sure. So as you built this business, when you first came in 2021, I know there was a part that was, hey, working with the senior leadership, getting them on board about food service, educating them, what this industry is all about, taking them out and seeing it for themselves. What else did you look at in terms of the business? Because I would imagine at the time, it's a smaller portion of the overall pie for Bell Food Service. So what are some of the initial things that you did to say, this is what we need to do to grow?
Yeah, so that's a really, really good question. You come in, we had some distribution, like a lot of organizations. Somebody called one day and said, "Hey, can you sell products?" And hey, I buy from this company called Cisco, and then somebody sets that Cisco location up in the system, and now you got a little bit of a business, and here we are. Let's expand that. For us, the first challenge that we wanted to address, we needed to go out and let's get distribution points, right? So when I say distribution points, I'm talking about operating sites, whether it's Cisco, from the large national broadliners all the way down to regional and local independents, right, in the marketplace. And for us, that was a key. Like we needed to show value that going to a distributor talk to them about their food service business where we could add value. But at the same time, and I think this is the piece that is really super important. Um, at the same time we were doing that, we were also out talking to key operators in the marketplace that could be anchor customers in a specific region. And we made a conscious decision not to. The desire from the organization was, holy smokes, let's go everywhere, right? Cisco, they've got 70 operating sites. If you're going to call on Cisco, we want to be in 70 markets. We can't support 70 markets. We don't have the bandwidth. We don't have the head count. We don't have the people, even at the time with our broker relationship. So let's go key market by key market. Let's go where population centers are. Let's go where we have the people resources. And we were able to, while we were building our relationship with Cisco, at the same time, we were working with a really large non-commercial anchor chain customer, Sodexo. And that really helped us. So we got an agreement in place with Sodexo, and then now we can pull some of that volume out. That was kind of step one for us. Is it took us, a good 12 months to really solidify our distribution points. The next overlay to that, why we were doing all those things, we decided to say, well, okay, we're going to go out and we're going to go train our sales agency around culinary development. So we want to go own these independent operators in every city, every market. And that's the bread and butter for a lot of distributors. Whether you're Cisco, whether you're an independent, they like that independent operator. And we knew we had a story. We knew we could take some of our brands in and train the broker team, even train the distributor sales team, that these items can help enhance the menu applications for your customers, right? So now you're bringing value. You're not leading on price. You're not selling a commodity. And those things are out there. People do sell on price and do sell commodities. That's takes everybody to make the industry work. We're selling these higher end products. We're about $10 a pound net sales. That's pretty expensive, right? But the key we leaned into was, Nick, hey, if you're doing a menu application, we can make that menu application better. We can help you sell at a higher margin with our products and our prices. So we really try to surround the industry. So get the distribution point while you're also pulling through demand, but then chase that independent operator. That was the business that Cisco was most excited about. The distributors, they like the case volume. They come with a large national account. They really appreciate you as a vendor if you go out and help them grow their local business. And so we made that our calling card. And it was train the broker salespeople, make sure that we were selling value, make sure we had a good selling story. And that was really the genesis, the first 18 months. And then we've just continued to apply the gas pedal to that, in the sense of add more people resources. So if we can do that in 3 markets, look what'll happen if we do it in 8 markets or 10 markets or 20 markets. And so we scale up, and then you go from having a handful of Cisco operating sites and distributor sites, and now you've got hundreds. And now suddenly you've got a real business, and you've got fuel to reinvest back into the organization. So the key takeaway is we didn't just do it in 18 months. It's taken us 4.5 years or 4 years to get from where we started to where we have a really viable, sustainable, long-term growth that we can continue to rely on for many years into the future.
What a really smart, the way you laid it out, it sounds very simple, but it's very complex. And going to get a national broadliner and Cisco on board, then pairing that with one of their largest operators in Sodexo, help create that pull through, and then expanding, starting regionally or within a local area, training the teams, hitting
Mhm.
those local independent operators, which I'm sure then once you start getting momentum, US Food starts calling, and then you probably have PFG and these other distributors that say, "I need to bring these products in because you're getting buzz in the marketplace."
Yeah,
Then you can start those organically from there.
you do. You get the buzz. So like the first 18 months, call first 24 months, we made a conscious decision. We didn't do a lot of external marketing. We didn't speak to the industry. We were going to go out and just, like I said, belly to belly selling, right? Blocking and tackling, get distribution points with your distributor partners, operator selling, operator execution, get a little bit of national account execution. And then I was like, okay, now we've got this really good story. So let's go start talking to the trade, meaning let's go to the key events, key industry events, whether it's the market vision events, whether it's the pizza show out in Las Vegas. We started to tactically invest there. At the same time, we said we need to have a dedicated marketing approach.
Mm.
Not every organization has the bandwidth to do that from a resource standpoint, from a dollar standpoint. Because we are, I would say, we're a branded company and we're so heavily focused on speaking to the consumer. It was a little easier for me to go in and sell the organization that we should have a dedicated food service marketing agency to help us speak to the key decision makers, to help, let's be in C Store Drive, let's be in QSR Magazine, let's be in Food Service Director Magazine with digital assets. And it's really just to drive awareness of our products. I think, if you talk to brand owners that are trying to get into the food service space, what we hear all the time, we go do like a Cisco trade show, for example, food show, and then we can debate the value of those events. That's the fight. Multiple podcasts. Everyone will have a different point of view on that. But I would go work in the marketplace with the team, Nick, and I would hear you'd have chefs and restaurant owners come by and say, "Oh, well, hey, I know your brand. I'm a consumer. I didn't know it was available in food service. I could do a lot of neat things with that in food service." So that's kind of like, we're 18 months into this, and we're like, all right, I think we have like it's an awareness issue. Like no matter how many doors we knock on, until we really push some kind of electronic social selling, being on the digital media platforms in a managed way, to have an expert, bring food service marketers in that could help us speak to the industry, and that's really been a force multiplier for a reasonable investment versus my revenue, to be able to activate the channel. So now you've got chefs all over the United States. They see us in the right place. They see us where they are going to look for information, and then that again, that just acts as a force multiplier. So again, for listeners, I would tell you, like, we didn't do it all at once. Like we didn't have the right to do it all at once. And had we done it all at once, we would have spent a lot of money and probably not been nearly as successful as slowly leaning into the channel. Um,
But look at you now, how far it's come.
yeah,
A lot of times brands, they put a lot of their on the topic of marketing, they put a lot of their marketing muscle and dollars into the retail side, maybe, the e-commerce side, Amazon, things like that. But good for you for doing it in food service as well and hitting where those chefs are because it is an area that I think a lot of brands neglect or say that, hey, we don't need to be in food service marketing. We have teams out there selling and doing just the face to face, but it's not enough. You have to get more eyeballs on your brand. That's how you build the brand, and that's how people become. You build authority and trust and things like that. And then chefs and decision makers say, hey, okay, let's give it. Let's at the very least, let's give it a shot. Let's try a sample and take it from there.
yeah, letting people know you're available. And look, so a key unlock for us, it's something we're really proud of is, we've told the organization, and I would say we're a marketing organization that happens to sell cheese. That'd be a good way to say it. That's probably a lot of companies are in that space. So we had, classically trained marketers, and we said, look, trends begin in the food service and the restaurant space, dining trends, flavor trends. And, again, that's another podcast idea for you, Nick. But we've said, how do we link what's going on with a restaurant chef, and not necessarily, it could be an influencer chef, but it could just be a chef that runs a restaurant. How do we link that with what we're trying to do on the retail side of the business, speaking to consumers? Because if you go out to a restaurant, your friends or family, and you have a really cool meal, a lot of times you're like, wow, that was a really good flavor combination. How do I do that? How do I replicate that at home? With my friends and family. If you're a foodie, whatever. And so we're now just beginning to kick off some really cool marketing interaction with where we're going to have chefs and folks that are in the restaurant space speaking to our restaurant customers, right? But also speaking directly to our consumer customers that, hey, you know what? We'd love you to come to our restaurant tonight. But maybe you don't live here. Maybe you're watching this and you're halfway across the United States, or maybe this is not convenient. You got young kids, or it's just the timing doesn't work. You can go and you can build these types of recipes using these ingredients, and we're going to show you how to do it. So just that further integration. Now we're a branded company, so not it doesn't necessarily work for everybody. If you're back of the house or maybe you're unbranded, et cetera. But really speaking to, if you've got a brand you're selling in grocery or retail, and you're coming to food service afterwards, and you want to work with Nick or somebody else, I think that would be the advice. Would be link all the fun stuff that's going on in the food service space with chefs and culinarians, and the stuff that goes on at the Pizza Academy and the restaurant show. Link that with the consumer to show the excitement, and suddenly now you've got your marketing dollars are just going to be that much more powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. Looking into the future, you built a great business here with Bell, with Cisco, Sodexo, getting into the marketing side, belly selling, getting the independent operators and whatnot, and have done just a fantastic job building your brand. What's next? Looking down line, that you think that would be an impact that would bring an impact to your business.
Yeah, so there are two areas that we're really focused on in terms of what's over the horizon. None of this is trade secret stuff. Portfolio expansion on some of our key brands, like Boursin, for example. So how do we meet the chef with the applications they need, putting it in the right format, putting it in different formats that they can use. So now there's different menu applications that doesn't require the labor or the working of the products at back of the house. And that's a big selling point. Labor matters right now, right? Labor is probably the toughest challenge most restaurants, that and food costs combined. So we're portfolio expansion, right? Bringing those things, but then also day part expansion. So how do we have one item that fits multiple day parts, so that supply chain becomes a little simpler? You don't have to stock as many items potentially. It's back to the value that I talked about earlier. It isn't just price. It's if you got one item, Nick, you can bring into your restaurant. If you're doing multiple day parts, suddenly you're a vendor that's going to get more attention. Ultimately, they might go with another product, but they're going to listen to you if you can simplify their supply chain. They got one less SKU they have to worry about running out of or order it from the distributors. That's really where we're going, I would say, on the back of the house. On the kind of the snacking space, we've got some cool snacking brands, Baby Bell, Go Go Squeeze. It's really about helping with flavor expansion. So giving them the hot flavors that are on trend, maybe being a trend leader, but also something as simple as, do we have the right packaging format? If you're in a micro mart, at a college, bookstore, or a hospital, you want to visit a friend in a hospital, maybe somebody had a baby or something, and you stop in that little cafe, having the right format on shelf matters. So really
Mhm.
display ready cases. Do we have packaging that speaks to the consumer? How do we gamify, the packaging? So there's maybe a QR code and you can interact with different things, because you're away, it's a different eating environment versus buying, pantry fill and eating at the house, or even putting in a lunch bag that you might bring to work or to school. So that's really where we're focusing our time and energy, is taking our brands and getting them in the right formats, um, which is not unusual if you're in the food service class of trade. That how do I make that package relevant to the operator? And sometimes that can be the difference between earning the sale, and having a new user, and having someone say, "I'd really like to use your product, but it doesn't work in my system." Come back after you've given me a product that works in my system.
Yeah, I mean, very well said. Well, y you've given so much, you've squeezed so much juice out of this lemon. You've really given a lot of nuggets here today, so thank you. Anybody listening along, you essentially in 30 minutes just laid out a pretty clear blueprint, or framework on how to build a business in food service, and you did it very eloquently. So I appreciate that, and thank you. I just want to say thank you for coming on to the podcast and sharing, your story and what you're building at Bell. I'm excited to see, what's next, especially as you get into, gamifying here some of the packaging and the products and new innovative items. Getting across multiple day parts with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I think that's really really smart. So, David, I just want to say again, thank you. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing.
No, it's great to be here, Nick. Always great to be part of it. Just I think what you're doing in the marketplace, it's a great industry. I love it. That's where my passion is. I think there's so many of us out here, that are yet to be discovered. That just they do this every day, whether you're in the back cooking or whether you're the person going in and trying to sell some products. It's a really cool industry. Um, we've been through a lot, and there's lots of good runway in front of us for anybody in this industry. So I'm excited to be part of it, and I appreciate you having me on today.
Of course, you're very welcome. Thank you. I appreciate you.